Welcome back, guys, to the Unfamiliar Business Podcast. This is episode 5, and today I have the pleasure of having my guest, Andrew Evans, here today. Thank you for coming over here.
Thank you so much, brother, for
And
having me.
Thank you. Andrew Evans, he started a podcast, a business podcast himself, Top 100 podcast on Apple Music, Ace Weekly. He's also started a couple of different businesses, which we will get into today. Currently is also working on a tech startup, and one of the most exciting things that I'm actually excited for is he is building a hotel in Tulum at the moment, which should be coming out in like October, December, I think.
Yeah, a couple months.
We'll get into it. But I would like for you to give a little introduction yourself. I think you could probably do it better than me.
Sure thing. Yeah, so my name's Andrew Evans. Grew up in Florida, originally from Jupiter.
Okay.
You know where that is?
Yeah,
So
I've been there.
about an hour and a half, 2 hours north here. Small little quaint town. Went to Florida State for school. Studied finance, real estate, entrepreneurship there. Went down, used to work, started running businesses at a young age. Always kind of did entrepreneurial things. I've started probably, I don't know how many failed companies. Not necessarily failed, but things that I eventually went,
part of the journey.
Put some energy into something else. But used to work in a sales company, built out and scaled. Like that's how we got connected. So was coming back and forth all throughout college down to Miami until I eventually moved here. Worked with that company for almost a decade, and had almost 1,000 sales reps on our team. Took our division from 3 offices to 24 offices in 1 year. And then eventually left that. And now I do all sorts of different things in the world. Like I said, I have a podcast. Have a deep passion for music and DJing, and live performance. I love to, I love to do anything that excites me. I have too many things. Like if there's like a list of things, like almost everything excites me.
Too many interests.
Yeah, exactly. So
I feel that.
I love fitness, love health, and I don't know. There's so much. So that's the basics.
Our sponsor for today is Polar's Bottles. You can go to their website, buy a bottle at polarsbottles.com, POLERCEBOTTLES.com. They are vacuum insulated bottles that keep your drink cold for more than 24 hours or keep your drink hot for more than 12 hours. I use it every single day for my coffee. Keeps it burning hot to the tip, just how you want it. If you're walking down the beach or you're going to the beach for a Saturday, it'll keep your margarita cold as well. So go out there and check them out. And they're also 33 to 50% lower priced than the competition. I love to ask this question because, I mean, you're here. You're definitely a successful young entrepreneur, and you have your passions, which you do as well. But who were you back in like high school or like middle school? Like there's people that were the jock or the athlete or the nerd or whatnot. So who were you back in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't that cool in high school. I like, just in retrospect, like I got to college, joined a fraternity, ended up becoming the president of that fraternity. But at the time, like in high school, I went to an academic, so I wouldn't have considered myself to be like a nerd, or I didn't even really think I was like that smart. Because I went to an academic magnet school and it was like number 7 in the country.
So everybody around you was smart.
Yeah. So like everyone was going to Ivy Leagues and getting like multiple people in my school got perfect SAT and ACT scores.
That's crazy.
So anyways, I was like ranked like 100 in the out of like 380 students. So I thought I was kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And then I got to college and I realized I was like, oh wow, I'm
I'm actually pretty
I
smart.
would have been like the valedictorian at all these other schools.
Yeah.
So like I never considered myself in that light. And I did a lot of like athletics, but I've always been like an artist at my core. So even that's how I approach a lot of business.
Yeah.
Is more like I love to create things,
100%.
even if it's like in a team. Like as soon as it starts becoming like maintenance or repetitive, like I lose my like flair and desire for it. So I love like taking vision and creating it. I was heavy into music growing up, even when I've done athletics my whole life, but it was mostly like fighting, wrestling, martial arts.
You did I remember because I used to see it on your Instagram. You did parkour for a while, right?
Yeah, parkour is another
That was
example.
crazy.
I still do a lot of
still do it,
parkour
okay.
and train that. So everything even I did athletically was all like had a slight artistic flair to it. I didn't do a lot of like team sports. Like, I mean, obviously wrestling was one, and I competed pretty seriously in that. but never played like football, basketball, anything.
Yeah.
So I like did a lot of was heavy in the academics and did a lot of like artistic stuff out of there. And then also I was always doing like entrepreneurial things. So like starting this business, doing this thing, selling whatever.
What was your first business?
My first business was a landscaping company, you know, which is a fancy way of saying I mowed people's yards. Which I started in like 5th grade. I think I started my first, like, so I had to mow my family's yard every weekend. And meanwhile, I'm like using like not the ride lawnmowers, like the push, like non-electric. Shit sucked.
Yeah.
And anyways, then I had the equipment, so I just went out and like made one summer. I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna get paid to do it.
Yeah.
And I literally just made flyers, knocked on every single person's door across the whole neighborhood. Now, like in retrospect, like I just had so much confidence doing this, but I realized how old am I in 5th grade? Like I'm like a 13-year-old knocking people's doors and be like, hey, I don't know how much you pay your landscaping guy, but I'll come in, probably do it better, and you just have to pay me like charge like nothing, like $30 for like your whole yard or $20. And so I started picking up clients, and then I'd spend the whole summer mowing yards. Eventually, after that, I upgraded to something that paid me more per hour, which is I did magic as a kid.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I literally called up all these restaurants, which is not like the way I went about it was entrepreneurial, which is like I literally picked out a Yellow Pages phone book, cold called through all the restaurants in my town. And again, at the same time, like at the time I had a lot of confidence, but I have to like now thinking back on it, I had like probably not even like really hit puberty at all. Like my voice is still like up here, and I'm like calling these restaurants asking to talk to their managers. And I would just basically call them, pitch them like, hey, I'm a local magician in town. Like I'll come into your restaurant. You don't have to pay me anything. I'll just work for like tips. And if you guys are happy with it, like, you know, I'll come in every single week and you guys can give me a night. So I lined up all these different nights. I make like $60, $70 an hour in like 7th grade, just doing table magic at restaurants. So that was the first couple of things I got.
So you were a salesperson from the beginning.
Yeah.
You weren't afraid to pick up the phone and start calling.
Dude, well, I really wanted to, like, I didn't come from like a lot of money, so like I was never in a bad situation. But like my family's, you know, some people come from like nothing, but like we were always like good and never worried about like food or anything like that. But there was never extra money for anything. There's no like big vacations. There's no like fun stuff. Anything I wanted to do, my own car, like I had to pay for it myself. So like I kind of got like sick of where I lived and being in the house, and like I just wanted to like get out. So I just was sort of like brainstorming all these different things that I could do to start making money and like just getting myself out there or having something, you know, to back myself. So I just found ways to like whatever I could do to like bring in some cash or income or something like 100%. That. I was finding them out.
The mowing lawns, it resonates with me because I remember back in like, I think it was like elementary too, like around maybe the same time, 5th, 6th grade, I went around that summer knocking on doors, washing cars, and I didn't think I did a great job. Now that I look back, I probably didn't wash it as well as I probably could have. I was a 5th grader. And then my dad saw me doing it one time. He got pissed. He goes, yo, you can't do that shit because I don't want the neighbors coming over here complaining that you didn't wash your car pretty well. And I was charging them $20. I was giving full wax. And then I made the flyers too. Like the flyers, I wrote on them. I put it into people's mailboxes. I remember it resonates with me too.
Yeah, it's the original entrepreneurship. Most people either get started with like something like that, mowing yards, or they're selling drugs or something. But they're doing something that's just like hustling. Or you're selling candy in school, like something where you're like, I can make a quick buck if I just do this and give them. You know, they learn the first supplier demand. You know,
exactly, 100%. Going back to your podcast, so what made you start your podcast, Ace Weekly?
So I started Ace Weekly back in 2018, I think. And at the time, I was running a sales office in Miami, and every day would have like 30, 40 people in my office in the mornings. With like, and it was basically like we were selling products, but it was basically like a little personal development. Like we didn't even talk about the products. It was like personal growth, personal development, that kind of world of things. And I remember thinking back, I was like, dude, I wish some of my friends, like in college at the time, could be exposed to some of this material, because I was like really grateful for like everything I learned in the network and like people I was learning from. And you know, I just was like, you know, I'm already running all these meetings every single morning for like hours. I should just start recording them. And I didn't even really know what a podcast was back in 2017 when I
Yeah, it
first
wasn't
started
like it
thinking
is
about
now
it.
that everybody has a podcast.
I was like, what's a like the that was the first summer basically in that summer was the first time I ever heard about a podcast and started listening to like Ed Milet and Andy Frisella at the time, who had the MF CEO podcast, and I was like, oh, I really love to start documenting and creating something similar. So fast forward, started. I just one thing led to another thing, which is what I was saying earlier. Is kind of how like all my projects usually go.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just start like recording it since I'm already doing it. And then it turns out like, well, if I'm gonna record, people are like, are you gonna do interviews? I'm like, yeah, I should do some interviews too. And then I was like, well, if I'm gonna record interviews, like I might as well get like the highest level people I can find. And then I was like, well, if I'm gonna put this out there and interview people, I might as well make it like this should be one of the top podcasts that's out there. So like 9 months later in March, launched it. Within a week, it was one of the top 100 business podcasts on Apple. And then it just kind of grew and took off from there. We've been running it for like 4 years now, and
awesome.
and then we released a second season back in December. So really, I just wanted to be able to, similar to probably you, I was already having the conversations.
Yeah.
The second thing is like there's a lot of at the time like influential people that I wanted to speak to, and when you're networking, it's like you always like, oh, you got to provide them value.
Yeah.
And I always like, there's a lot of people I wanted to reach out to, and I was like, what am I going to reach out to them about? Like, what do I like? I don't have anything to like. Hey, will you talk to me for an hour?
Yeah.
And exactly, and now I actually had something of like, oh, I can offer them value of like, hey, it was a conversations that I already would wanted to have not recorded, but like now I have an excuse to like reach out to with high level people that like I really had no business talking to, but because I had a top performing podcast at the time, like people that are running $500 million funds and like have $1 billion assets under management are talking to me like as at the time I'm like a junior or senior in college, so that was really helpful.
Yeah, it gives you that exposure, 100%. Yeah. That's awesome, man. And then, so who are some people that you've had on the podcast that?
Yeah, so a couple of people I've interviewed. Like one of them was the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate. Yeah, so Chris Stewart, that was one of the ones, and that was one of the first like couple months of starting it. Interviewed like the top performers at Salesforce. Interviewed the person that did like all the marketing behind like Obama and Trump on like their election. Like he goes on both sides.
Yeah, he goes on.
He just trying to pick the winners
no matter what.
yeah. So interview people that do like all the political marketing. I've had Mark Gober on there, who's one of like the leaders in the U.S. right now. And like he went from being a partner in an investment banking firm to now is like on, I forget the boards that he's a part of, but like a lot of the leading boards and research groups that study consciousness and science. That was really, really cool to do. Just interviewed a lot of other people that have been like young hustlers that have started very successful, like $50-100 million plus companies before they're even 25 or 30. Like one of the guys that we brought onto the show was like one of the leading like speakers in Africa, which was really cool. Like he's starting to build a really big community out there of everything that they're doing. So, and it's been like a mix. I think it started to change. Like I've interviewed a lot of people that have started, built, and sold successful companies. And then, like I mentioned too, I'm starting to prepare to create a new podcast platform that's a little bit more in the side of not just interviewing entrepreneurs, but interviewing people that are artists, creators, and people that are like moving and shaking how we do things in the world.
So you talked a little bit about consciousness and science. Yeah. And I know that's something that interested you. So what got you interested in consciousness?
Like being alive and asking questions. It's always kind of like interesting to me. There's this it's great video. I forget who it's by, but it talks about sense making and how like, you grow up as a kid, basically your first like 15 years alive, like the natural human inclination is to try to like make sense of like what kind of world are we even living, like you don't understand it yet,
and you're learning
like
things,
you're like learning like
touching this, what is this
is a chair, this is an oven that I get burned by, that's people, they're talking, that's language, like you're putting together all these mental frameworks, and we do that for so long, and then eventually most people get to a point or an age where they just stop, they just go, oh yeah, we got it all figured out. And like the reality is that we know nothing for the most part as human beings about like reality or how this world actually works, or even the planet. Like people are like, oh, trust the science. Like science doesn't know shit about
changes
most of the world.
Every 100 years. It's like that was a bunch of bullshit.
It changes every couple years, bro. It's like when you actually like, even for instance, 70%, we think we know so much about the Earth. literally 70% of the earth is water, and like we don't know 99% of the ocean, which is the majority of the earth. Like we don't know anything about it or what's in there or how, like nothing. You know, so there's
we know
just
more
so
about
many
space
things.
and the ocean from what I've read.
Right, from our own planet.
That's
and
crazy.
like how much do we really know about space?
Yeah,
like
if we know more,
you know, it's so
know.
there's just a lot of things where I think people stop to like they just assume like, oh, we know everything and like trust things, but every single time, especially when something is a profound new discovery. So like for instance, Mark Gober wrote that book. It's called, the first one he wrote is The End to Upside Down Thinking, which just talks about, it's dispelling the myth that consciousness is produced in the brain. And so the whole entire idea is behind that is that people, there's like different layers of it. Some people think about like, hey, we're physically here, and then they're, you know, some people don't even believe in like anything they can't physically see, which is kind of crazy to me, considering almost every type of energy form is invisible, like the ones that would be well established by science, including things like electromagnetism and
radio waves.
Everything is invisible energy. And so some people like have trouble wrapping their heads around that, and a lot of people will say, all right, there's something called consciousness, there's energy that's moving around and we can't see it, but they think it's like secondary. It's like there's a physical world, and then the physical world produces energy or produces consciousness. Like our brains, which is like we're 3D and physical, that produces consciousness, versus what he proposes and what a lot of people talk about is that like consciousness is fundamental, meaning like it comes first, meaning the physical reality that we live in, this table. Yeah, exactly. So this table is not producing, like our bodies are not producing consciousness. Consciousness, like all the invisible stuff, is producing the physical stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's like the idea of like dark matter in the universe or antimatter. It's that there's all this invisible stuff, and all the invisible stuff is the 97% is like the most of reality is invisible.
Yeah.
And all the invisible stuff is producing the physical reality that we all see and experience, which is different for every single person. Just like we might see different like we're looking at this room and like we're looking through two different eyes, seeing a different
like
room.
This is white to both of us because but maybe I see it differently than you do.
Yeah, exactly. And people have different perceptions, which is like, that's not, there's invisible things that are creating the physical things that we believe and trust. And so there's so much more to it that I think we don't understand. So I don't know how exactly I fell into that world. The reality is I probably took background, I think, is I took a psychedelic and had
What psychedelic did you take?
I took acid.
Okay.
had a bad trip. Actually a bad trip, but a good trip.
But you experienced different consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. So I experienced that, and then that was when I realized, like, dude, I was terrified of myself. It was super surreal feeling, and I remember that was when I realized, like, oh shit, I got some deep stuff I need to work through. And so I started getting into a lot of these other communities and masterminds that were leadership and achievement based and influence based, but like as you go more into that world, it always ends up going into a more spiritual world, because I think we do live in a spiritual world. And so just started getting exposed to a lot of those communities and things like that. People interviewing people on the podcast, and doing my own exploration. And I say all this stuff too with lightness, because pretty much every single thing that I believe in now, like I used to make fun of people for believing in. Like when people used to talk about energy or chakras, or like even like things like meditating or like basic stuff that's like now widely accepted. Like meditation is like it's like a normal thing. Like sales teams do it, sports teams do it. But like I remember going to an event back in 2016 with a bunch of business leaders, and that was the first time they were like bringing in this thing called meditation. And like they literally had to mentally prep people for like half an hour to like get them to be okay with like doing this weird woo-woo thing called meditating.
And not be like cracking up and
and like, now we're 6 years ahead of time, it's like common knowledge stuff. But there's a lot of those things that I think, like all sorts of things between that I used to, energy, astrology, all these things I used to like make fun of people for, and I'm like, you believe that? And now I'm like, oh shit, I believe and from my own experience is always the biggest teacher. So I've had a lot of my own journeys and experiences that I think have brought me awareness or understanding on certain things, and also a lot of lack of understanding and curiosity on all the things that I still, and most of us, can't really wrap our heads around. So that's kind of how it started.
That's awesome, man. That's super interesting. And one of the things that I realize is the more you try to learn things, right, the more you start like learning different aspects of everything, the more you realize that you know absolutely nothing. and it's crazy. It's like the more you learn things, the more you see how small and insignificant not insignificant, we're significant in our own way, in our own basically like vibration, but at the same time, like we're so small compared to everything around us. Like we know nothing, absolutely nothing.
There's a quote by Zen Master Roshi, who's famous for all these quotes, but he talks about like, hey, the true sign of like mastery, or the true sign of a master, is being a master and never admitting that you're a master. Like, it's like the idea is like, because it like a true, like once the more you actually know, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, if you look at any like an Einstein or people like that, the more they like learn and discover about the world, the more they realize, oh shit, I don't know
Socrates
anything.
Too,
like this doesn't make we don't know anything.
Absolutely anything.
You
Like,
know?
we know nothing. Like we know absolutely nothing.
And
like,
the people that know very little are the ones that think
I know
they
everything.
know everything.
Yeah.
No, this is this. Trust the science, the facts. It's like
that's why I also feel like in your journey, for example, that you were just explaining, once you started, like you used to make fun of those things, but once you started learning about more things, you started becoming more open-minded, because you're like, I want to learn as much as I can because I know nothing. Like I want to start learning all these other things, all these different aspects, all these different like for example, astrology, or where you're talking about spirituality or the chakras, all that, all those things. You're like, I want to learn as much as possible from everything, so I can like actually like understand a little bit more, even though it's gonna be a little bit, and I'm still not gonna know everything, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's like very easy to see that there's been a lot of things that have been built up in our society that we've been programmed to believe or to think or to act in certain ways. You know, one of the things I'm like, long term, I have a big passion for is like education and changing the education system, because like even then it's like if you just go back to history and look at like why things are the way they are today, it's like, why does our education like system suck? Or it grooms people because it was created during the industrial times by a small group of people to pump out more factory workers. It's basically created to it's made to create worker bees, not like entrepreneurs, not free thinkers.
100%.
You're rewarded for sitting in your little stupid chair and sitting still and focusing in class, little Johnny. Because if you can't focus, or you're not interested in this stuff that has literally zero relevance to your life, then you're never going to be successful. And it's like, you won't be successful in our little system.
Yeah. You're trained to be an employee. As there, and I watched Jordan Peterson podcast the other day, and he was talking about how our model and also the Japanese model for education was actually, which is exactly what you were saying, it was based on like the Prussian military and how they teach people. So it was just basically like putting you to just follow orders blindly and not like open your mind and be creative. And he says, like what you were saying, you know, like when you open your mind and you're creative, you get rewarded for that, but you're not taught that in school. So then you have like people that like want to be creative with these things. They have a conflict with the current education system when they're there. They're like, I don't understand this. You get rewarded for this, but that's not what I'm learning here. And I think that's a huge problem.
Yeah, and education is just one example, but there's so many like societal constructs that we've
100%.
created, especially in America particularly, that like if you go back in and do a little bit of research of like, why does everyone believe that, or why is that the way things are today, it's like a lot of it's purposely manufactured and created to be in that way. And even like just getting, like America is one of the biggest ones, but like every country has their own, right? If you just go talk to, like traveling a little bit will expose you to a lot of like things that if you come back in America and you do something there, people are like, look at you like you're crazy. And then you realize like that's only in this city, or that's only in this part, like this country. Anywhere else, like it's pretty status quo to do certain things. And you realize that like people oftentimes live in bubbles. And they like to think that their bubble is how the rest of the whole entire world and reality works, but it's really not. You know, that's why we even talk about, like, when people talk about systemic issues in the country, it's like, yeah, like a lot of times, like, just because that's a problem in New York City, or that's a problem in Chicago, doesn't mean it's a problem in, like, Palm Beach, Florida. Or doesn't mean it's a problem in, like, whatever, Alabama or Texas. Like, everywhere is so, if you just travel a little bit, you'll realize, like, how different people are, and like the problems and challenges are different because people believe different things.
100%. Even when you travel outside of the country, you start, it's even more, it like opens your mind more to different cultures, different societies. Also, another thing that I feel puts you, because I feel when you're programmed throughout your youth, even by your own parents, by your family, right? Like you get these set of beliefs that you're just taught that, and that's the way that you start believing. And you don't break out of that. Very few people break out of that and see that. And Steve Jobs talked about this a lot. Even Kanye West talks about it, and it's like, you know, like you're a little kid and you go explore something in like your backyard or something, and your parents go, don't go there, don't go there, and then you're like, okay, why can't I go there? And you stop going there. So
Right.
it's similar like that. That's just an
It's like
analogy. I'm
that. You
saying
seen the
to
Truman Show?
no, I haven't.
Truman Show. It's like Jim Carrey. It's a great movie, but it's basically like he's a so essentially the setup of the movie is that like it's a television show, and he's like the star of it, and everyone else, he lives in this, it's like a dome, a fake society that's been created, and they basically, it's a reality TV show for like 30, 40 years of this guy's life. It's been airing. Everyone in it is an actor, except he's the only like person that doesn't know that he's in a giant actor.
Yeah.
Everyone, and he just goes to things, does the work. They like program him as a kid where they make him, so it's like an island, and they make him like, they drown him a little bit as a kid so that he's scared of water and never goes and explores the fact that he's in a little glass dome on a TV show with everyone watching him.
That's
and like
crazy.
And then eventually like starts catching on to things and like breaks out of it. But yeah, similar to that same way.
Like a lot of people live like that in a certain way. Like
where they never like they got some traumatic experience, so they were told don't do this or you should believe this, and then they never question anything outside of that. You know, so it leads you to be very, very limited in how you operate in the world. Don Miguel Ruiz, the Four Agreements, he talks about the same thing, like the dream, you know, and of like, hey, like we're all given like this dream that we live in, and it's like your parents give it to you, your friends and family give it to you, society gives it to you, education gives it to you, like
drills it
your
into
business
like
of like, hey, this is how it's
mentality.
supposed to be. And most of the things that like people, that was like a really crazy, like the conscious piece is that most people, and like kind of where I was talking about what we want to do with the startup, is that like most people are like make most of their decisions based off of beliefs that aren't even theirs. They were given to them. They didn't form those beliefs on their own. Someone else gave them those beliefs, and they don't realize that. So they make a lot of these decisions or choices or choose career paths or how they want to live and operate in the world based off of a lot of beliefs that like were just given to them by society or their parents, and like guess where their parents got their beliefs from
their parents.
You know, and they're the same thing. So it's like there's a lot of this stuff where the difference when someone becomes conscious and aware and like a free thinker, like many entrepreneurs are, of like thinking out of the box, thinking creatively, not necessarily just believing everything, but being curious, asking questions, and forming your own opinions based off of beliefs, like experience, you know, as a teacher.
I think that's the best way. And once you, it's like crazy thing is once you come out of that, like that little box that you're in, because everybody in a way is in that box at one point, right? Like majority of people, right? They're taught this thing, right? Like go to college, do this, get a degree, or many other different beliefs throughout many aspects of life. And once you break out of that and you start like realizing like I'm learning through observing reality, and I'm learning like that, and that's how I'm gonna start developing my beliefs. It's just like you're starting to live a completely different life. It's like you're born again in a way.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And the crazy part about that journey too is that once you break out of that box, if you continue down that path, you eventually find out and realize that you're in another bigger box. And then you break out of that box and you find out there's another one. And there's like always a level of like these patterns or beliefs that we've developed and that have been given to us. And it takes like people to like wake up, you know, and be aware. And the great thing is that there's a lot of people that are waking up to things like that all around the world. That's why, like on that conscious note, like, you know, like there's a shift in human consciousness that's happening on the planet. And that was another big reason why we started like the podcast and continued on with the show, is because we wanted to support with that. And at the same time, as you can see with a lot of the animosity and craziness that's happening in the world right now, like there's a lot of people that are like waking up and becoming more conscious, and there's also just as many people that are falling asleep, like harder and harder and harder, like complete, like do not think of anything. And to your point about the Kanye West stuff earlier, it's like that's because like he speaks out about that stuff because almost that's like if you know anything about the music industry and how it's ran, all those rappers, all those people, like they basically when they talk about selling their soul, it's because they make them sign these contracts where like they're now a slave to these companies, and
they're just
they're producing all this money. They don't even realize how much they're producing. It's a little bit different kind of today. But for a long time, the only way you became famous is signing a deal with one of these record labels before people started coming out with their own, and now everyone has one. But you have to sign with these people. We're going to make you famous. We're going to put you in shows, TVs. but people didn't realize is like, oh, you're gonna have to take these drugs or supplements. You're gonna have to only speak about these things. If you do that, we're
They
pulling the
place you in
plug
the
on you.
box.
Yeah, they feed you everything.
Yeah.
And so what people don't realize is that like for the majority of it, every single artist that they listen to, they're all managed by the same little group of people, and so you don't hear anything that's outside of that. Every single news channel and media consumption, like everything we get fed, is coming from a small, source of people. And now, and to a certain degree, people are becoming more conscious and aware. Like, Chance the Rapper like started that home. Like people started to realize like, oh, I can have my own record label. People are like trying to go outside of the social media box and things and like platforms. Like people. Yeah. It's both like a more censored world than ever before, and at the same time, it's more open. Like, there's podcasts. People have like me and you that would have never had platforms before.
Yeah,
like
we get to have a platform.
Have a platforms. People can interact with people in other countries. Yeah. So it's a weird balance between things getting like progressively much better in a lot of ways and progressively like more fucked up in a lot of ways. And it's like it's like people becoming awake and people becoming like more and more asleep.
Like polarizing to both sides and.
Yeah,
almost everything.
And that's like, one big thing is I think people like, with the current times and everything that's going on, a lot of people like worry. Like my view, at least that I choose to hold, is that like we're moving into a more conscious world and like a better, like, society. But at the same time, it's like there's so many of these old structures that have ran and been constant for so long that like for things to actually change, like there needs to be a little bit of a shakeup. It's like before like new forests and trees can grow, like the old forest has to burn down. And so like part of the process of us like evolving into a more higher conscious world, more like a world filled with more love and peace, with more like more free resources and like just like a better world essentially, is like a lot of the old stuff has to burn down. So at the same time as like, oh, everything's going to like shit and everything's like getting messed up in America and all these countries and things are collapsing. At the same time, it's also like part of that kind of needs to happen because that like allows people. It's like our current president stuff, like that a lot of that woke a lot of people are waking up to like just how bad it is, and a lot of people like you thought that was a good idea. Just for the record,
you see a lot of people now saying like I regret voting for.
Yeah, exactly. And now they realize like, okay, so like when things get bad, it's not just like getting bad. It also is like it helps people wake up and helps old things got to crumble for new things to be able to flourish and grow. So I hope that we're moving in a positive direction, and I know some things will have to probably get a little bad, before new systems and new creations are allowed to like take place.
That's how it's always happened in history too, though, right? Like every, like as we've moved on and became more conscious as well, you go back thousands of years, civilizations had to be destroyed for better civilizations to come along. So I think it's just, it's a cycle that naturally has to happen.
Yeah, it's a
creative
cycle.
Destruction in a way, even in business.
Ebbs and flows. That's like the only thing that's constant. Is that like nothing is permanent.
Yeah,
everything
change is
like,
only.
There's always a up market. There's always a down market. One society gets built up, has its climax, becomes a great society, and eventually one day or another, like nothing lasts forever. It collapses and a new thing is formed. And so everything like in this world like ebbs and flows. That's why like the polarity thing is. We live in such a polarized world right now. Between like, in America, the right and the left, masculine versus feminine, capitalism versus socialism, like everything is like one side or the other. Yeah. Which is like where we're headed to is like in between. Yeah. Which is, where we're supposed to go. It's like the integration of independence and dependence, the integration of masculine and feminine, it's the integration of like the East, China and like the West of like the American ways. And so eventually there's going to be a meeting point, but like kind of like a magnet when you think about polarity. If you have two magnets and you want them to stick together and you have them flipped in the opposite direction to where they're polarizing and repulsing each other, like it has to get as far as possible away. Like it has to repulse to like as far as it can possibly go, like polarity wise and repulsion, till eventually goes whoop, and then snaps back together and is becomes one. So that's why it's like we all kind of like things kind of need to get a little bit more polarized, and people realize like what the hell are we doing? Like
we should meet in the middle.
Yeah, exactly, like, and come together.
Yeah. I agree with that. And what do you think has caused this polarity though? Like, what do you think has caused people to just in politics or in like capitalism, socialism, or just polarity in general, like
I mean,
people in this moment in time for people to just go completely opposite directions.
I think it's what we were talking about earlier. Just people being programmed and like not having their own beliefs. It's like I would never really like align myself to like, even if I have like certain views, I'm not gonna like pledge allegiance to a party.
Yes. 100%.
You know, I
agree
don't
with that
care what
100%.
party it is. It's just like I'm not gonna like pick a side and just side with that side. Like
Yeah.
even political parties,
Yeah.
how they used to be is they used to have like beliefs, morals, and values, and then there'd be like certain topics on the agenda, and then there would be these are our beliefs and our values, and based on that, here are the current problems at hand. Here's what we believe.
Yeah.
Now it's not has like one belief completely contradicts like
Yeah.
oh we believe that on that piece of the agenda, and then over here it's like oh my body and my choice here but not on that one.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
don't have
yeah.
a choice, sucker.
Yeah.
So it's like there's
It's
not real
hypocrisy.
people are just being like believing like they're following the crowd. They're
Yeah, yeah,
following
yeah.
it, and I think that's like enough people like waking up and being like wait a second, as long as we keep doing this, it's like a dog spinning and chasing its own tail.
Yeah.
It's just like
We're
it's
not
a
getting anywhere.
never-ending circle. So
Yeah.
anytime I think in this world, like we live in a world that is polarized, right? That's just like the energy of the whole entire world. The same thing I was saying earlier of like the East versus the West, like masculine versus feminine, capitalism
sides
versus
to everything.
socialism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's two
exactly.
poles
Like
to
I'm a
everything.
big
Yin and
believer in
yang.
capitalism.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, capitalism has built this country. It's what's created so much of the greatness in the world. And if you believe that like capitalism, like is purely the answer, and it's like as homeless people
It's
get left
not.
in the
Yeah,
streets
that's what
and
I'm
like
saying.
things
Yeah,
like that,
there
it's
has
like
to
not
be a
perfect
social
answer.
safety
Right.
net.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
like-
socialism.
Yeah,
Like
it's terrible.
has never worked
Yeah,
once.
It's never worked, and it's never gonna work.
You know, but like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
is there like hey, if it's like is it do we have to choose between that or that? It's like well probably neither of those answers.
Yeah,
It's
like it's
probably
somewhere in the middle.
You
Yeah,
know, same thing with
100%.
like you know, America is a very independent country.
Yeah.
The West is very dependent. The East is very dependent, more community based, more
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
socialistic based. So, you know, we have a lot of like dependency is like it kind of goes dependency, independency, and then there's this thing in between called or above that, but in between called interdependency, which means it's like the more conscious way of approaching it is that like, hey, when you're dependent, like you're stuck in places and you're dependent upon other people, which isn't really a great spot to be in. Independence is great. But also it's like everyone fend for themselves, which is why like in America, when you look at like, sure, social media causes like all the mental disorders that are being created and like the anxiety and depression that exists in our country like no others. And it's a lot of places and it's caused by things like social media and things like that. But like we have those things in everywhere.
Yeah.
Why is it so prevalent in America? Well, a lot of it's because we place so much level of importance on the individual, which is a very valuable thing, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But a lot of times, like when we place so much of like this, oh, we're living in a free world, like you could become something, and it's like, oh, and by the way, like you better make something of yourself, or else you're gonna be nobody. You're never gonna be successful. You're gonna fail. You're gonna be like left on the streets. Like you better do something. Versus like, and so people have to feel like they have to become this thing in America to be like successful, to be like have purpose in the world. Versus out in a lot of other countries, like there's community, there's like people, even if you're like the coffee shop person or you just help out with this, like you don't really have a, you know, you're not like an entrepreneur or the success story of like, but people feel like they have a sense of like meaning and purpose in their lives doing what they're doing because they're part of a community.
Yeah.
And there's like a bigger purpose beyond that.
Yeah.
So, you know, like there's pros and cons of both.
Yeah.
Like the solution is like interdependentness, which is like free, conscious, independent people that have their personal autonomy, willingly choosing to come together and work with people to create
Yeah.
something better. Like choosing to like they're independent, they're their own. It's like a couple. You know, of like when people are codependent and it's like they rely on the other person to fulfill their needs of like, oh, I'm only going to be happy. You have to make me happy. Like a successful relationship is when
So
two
we
people
have
that
to make each other happy.
that like, well, I think two people that are like, no, I'm in charge of my own happiness. It's not your
Okay.
job. It's my
Yeah.
job. You're in charge of your own happiness.
Yeah.
And we both work on that. Like,
Yeah.
and also come selflessly to the relationship. We're going to create even more like happiness and joy together of like
Gotcha.
two independent parties that like, you know, own themselves, but like also choose to like be a team, choose to
Yeah.
be like, choose to like, oh, 1 + 1 instead of like us being independent. It's like 1 + 1 = 3. Like when we come together, we co-create more
Yeah.
than what's possible when we're not together.
Yeah.
Versus like
I agree.
the West is like 0.5 + 0.5 = 1.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
like we
yeah.
all
It's
kind of
not
come
true.
together
It's
and like,
1 +
you
1
know,
= 3.
Yep.
Yeah, but the thing about that, right, the individual versus the community is, I feel like when you go towards, like, for example, talking about economically, right, like capitalism versus socialism, right, if we're talking about that, is the only way to reach interdependency, in my opinion, like successfully as a country and move the economy forward, is through far more capitalism and socialism. Because the reason I say that is, when you're like, if you're allowing for individual to have complete freedom, right, then what you're essentially saying is you have the freedom as an individual to go and meet up with people that are like-minded like you and create something. So if you have individual rights, you're allowed to do that, right? If you're in a country that, you look at any socialist country, then there your socialism or communism is about the community itself, right? But it's coerced in a way, right? Like you're forcing people to work together that might not want to do those things.
No, yeah, I 100% agree, and I think it's like goes left, right, left, right, left, right. It's like a step up the ladder. It's like a spiral staircase, right? And this, I think, socialism down here, capitalism is over here, and then there's another one that moves back over into the realm of like more socialistic, but it came off of a capitalistic society.
Yeah.
So like Mark Gober, that guy that wrote that book on human consciousness, I interviewed him on a podcast for our second season, and he wrote 2 more, which is like An End to Upside Down Thinking is the first one. Then he wrote An End to Upside Down Living, which is like more like, okay, how do you take this information and actually like integrate it into your life, and what does it actually mean in a person's life? And then the last one he wrote, I think, An End to Upside Down Government or something, but it's talking about like the future of government. And what he talks about is like curious to know like his proposals of like, oh, you see this becoming more conscious world, like how do you see that taking place? And he's like, essentially it is basically more private companies creating the socialistic programs and fulfilling the roles of the government. Because every time the government touches anything, they fuck it up. Like literally every single program, like every time, like all the things that are outrageously expensive of all these people, like, oh, we need to tax the rich and the corporations, is like, well, you should also look into why they have the system set up the way they do, is because the government has passed these bills and laws that are protecting these people or letting these people pay no taxes or whatever it is. And it's like every time the government, the most inefficient company in business ever. And he talks about like there's no checks and balances with the people, to where like if you're a private company today, like if your customers aren't happy, like it ain't gonna work. Like if your shareholders aren't like you have a financial and the fiducial duty to your customers and to your shareholders of like you have to follow through with things. If something's not efficient, you have to fix it, or you're going to go out of business. You're no longer going to be a company. The government is the only business where they can run all these programs, be the most inefficient ever, and they still get paid more and more every single year and never have anything to worry about.
They have a monopoly on money, essentially. And they can continue taxing people and get as much money as they want and continue being extremely inefficient.
And they're incentivized to do that, right? Because they like, if you don't use your budget, you're going to lose it. So just spend it on ridiculous. There's no efficiency at all in it. So it's like we need, to your point, like we need all these. There needs to be social nets. There needs to be programs that take care of people. Like we're moving more and more to where there's less middle class, more poor, more wealthy,
more
and eventually that's going to create like hundreds and thousands of homeless people in every city all over the country. And then, by the way, for all the people that aren't homeless, like you're not going to like that.
And even if you're rich, and this is a point that Ray Dalio, you're probably familiar with him, he talks about a lot, and he says when there is a lot more inequality, right, when it's less of a middle class and a lot more poor, very rich, creates a lot of instability, and that's how the rich, essentially, if you're rich, you don't want that, because eventually the people are going to revolt against you and they're going to rebel. And
a lot of your companies make money off of the middle class.
Exactly.
And the other people.
Exactly.
You don't want a two-class society. That's like going back to the polarized. That's like how you move things in more of a polarized direction. So at the end of the day, like it's private companies, capitalism driving, and private companies creating more social programs. And by the way, it doesn't have to necessarily be a nonprofit, but there's so many different ways of like pulling money together and creating it in a way where it is like a co-creation of and we're taking care of people in the process, and like it's really taking things off of the government's responsibility. Like they should be charged probably not a lot more other than like the basic like judicial, like very, very basic things that go to the government.
Literally.
And then the rest of the
smallest
stuff, like
government possible.
Private companies should come in and like and there needs to be more private companies that are helping
Yeah.
the people and the ways in society that needs help. But like
Yeah.
every time the government does it, it's like we're just wasting money and
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
it never actually, almost all the time, it does more harm than good.
Yeah.
And even though the desire is like, we have this problem, they just make the problem bigger.
Yeah. Something interesting that I wanted to ask you about, talking about this subject too, is because I've actually seen this, and it makes sense if you think about it like very far, like with AI and like all the how far we've came with technology. Is eventually, do you ever think we'd reach like a socialistic utopia because of AI, where like machines are just 10 times more efficient than humans, and they can provide all the resources that we essentially need, and all the jobs available are only going to be jobs that like you want to do? Maybe you're an artist, you want to be able to, perform and like, or do whatever you want to do that doesn't require employees anymore, because just machines are 10 times more efficient than humans in general.
I think there's an opportunity too, and that's my hope, is that we enter that place. And I think AI is going to play a role in it, but at the same time, it's why I think, for instance, like we need to explore like the capital, like AI as an example of like everyone thinks about the McDonald's workers and things like that being replaced by AI, but what AI like
more.
there's some things that a human can do that AI will never going to be never going to be able to do, like the actual human experience, being alive, being conscious, being able to like having a heart, being an artist, being a creator, being able to interact with people on that social level. At least AI probably won't be able to do that for a long time.
Yeah.
But like the level of like, when Elon Musk comes out with this like Neuralink stuff, and people can, like we are already kind of half cyborgs.
We are cyborgs.
We have a phone, but it's
Noah Harari talks about that.
It's a short.
Yeah.
It's a relatively slow time period of like, I can think of something, I can type it in Google my phone, I have the answer.
Yeah.
Once that time period is shortened to like a millisecond, to where it's like I think of something and I have the information. Think about education, schooling.
Yeah, you have Google in your head.
Med school and things like that too. Of like, the robot's gonna be smarter than the doc. You can hop into a body scanner and boom, they know exactly what's wrong with you a lot more than. So when people think about like low level jobs like truck drivers or something else like that, blue collar jobs being replaced, they don't think about like actually every job that requires high mental aptitude. Those are all the ones that are eventually going to get replaced by AI. All the things that are like knowledge based, or like you have to be smart. Like the value of knowing a lot of stuff will go completely out the window, because anyone can access all the information all the time. So, I do definitely see there being an opportunity for us to create, and I think that's eventually the world we're in a really weird time, where it's like things are shaking, moving. I think the financial system's going to be different. I think, a lot of things are going to grow and change. So I don't know exactly how it's all going to play out. But there's, I guess, two ways of thinking about it. Either we're going to move into like the whole world's going to blow up eventually, and like we're all going to die, and like the world's going to turn into a absolute like shithole, or we're going to move into a much like better, more conscious society than we've ever been. I choose to hold the second one as a belief. When I operate in the world.
There's a belief. I saw this podcast one time. I think it was, I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, Randall Carlson, I think it is. I'm not 100% sure if that's his name, but he talks about, what he says is, like humans, like Homo sapiens in general, have had like the same brains for like more than tens of thousands of years. Like we haven't really evolved that much, like in the last like 20, 30,000 years. That's what he says. So he believes that there was a society like far before, like during like the pyramids, for example, like that were highly advanced, and they had a very high consciousness, and some way or another they actually got extinct. So something you said, like there was a war or something, or it's a far off belief, but it's something interesting, interested me. And he says that, there was like a great reset, and basically we're finding a lot of like consciousness that they had back then.
Yeah,
Do you believe in any of that or no?
I don't think it's too far off to believe.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly what happened, but I don't think we're advanced at all.
Yeah.
I think also too, like there was a great reset at one point or another. Like, a lot of people are, if you're Christian or Catholic, the Bible, the story of like Adam and Eve, the fall, and
fall of Babylon.
I think a lot of that is a true, not in the literal sense that a lot of people interpret it, but a lot of that is a very true story. But I don't necessarily think that was the beginning of time, and that's where things started. I think that's the beginning of where this era picked up on. And there was some sort of fall from a conscious place. Of like, if you just look around, and there's all sorts of things about the Sumerian culture, Egyptian culture, Atlantis, like all these prehistoric cultures that are talked about. Like, even, dude, I live in Tulum, Mexico now too. Like, even seeing like like I'm in a lot, our hotel is Mayan, and Mayans were a very interesting group, but some of the stuff that they knew, dude, it's like they knew things that like
we had no
are
idea,
so advanced, and like we'll discover like we'll come out with a major scientific discovery in the past like couple years, and then it's like, oh, it turns out the Egyptians and the Mayans and all these people, like they already built it into the design of these buildings that we don't even know how they built in the first place. Of like, it's like, oh, we're so smart, and then like we're like discovering things that like ancient cultures knew like way before. So and it's the same thing I think with indigenous cultures, which is why I think like you talked about the brain changing. I think that is like the conscious shift of like, it's not our brains growing more and us becoming more mental. Like that's the whole point of like why we are struggling to grow, is because like the answer is not like more brain, it's like less brain, and being more connected to. It's like when you take a psychedelic, for instance, a lot of drugs, weed, cocaine, things like that, they'll if you study a brain on a scanner, it highlights different regions of the brain. Like a certain part of the brain becomes more activated, more charged when you take like most drugs. When you take a psychedelic and you have arguably like the craziest physical experience where you're seeing, things like seeing weight, like you'd think like that would cause the most light up of the brain from like how the physical sensations and experience and things that you're seeing. But it's actually the opposite. It actually turns the brain off. So when you when you deactivate parts of the brain,
actually didn't know
is
that,
when you start to see and experience all of these things. So, like we were talking about earlier, it's like the brain, probably not the producer of consciousness, but more like a filter of a consciousness. And like the thing is peeling back. We've made these filters get stronger and stronger and stronger to where like it's hard for us to even technologically advance, because like free energy, for instance, is very, very possible. And it's pretty clear if you look back that like multiple societies in the past have came up with free energy where they can essentially pull energy from the ether or from the air.
Which is Tesla. Nikola Tesla was actually working on that.
And he was killed.
He was killed. And a lot of people, like, I don't know if you've heard about the guy that was doing the car that runs on water. He was killed too, and supposedly he had an engine that ran strictly on H2O.
Because all the people that control and run this
can make
world,
money. They can't make money anymore.
It is in their best interest to keep people like
suppressed.
Keep people suppressed. And like, if again, any person that finds that stuff, discovers it, or starts to like, it gets to a certain point where like it can't be stopped, where it's so much public information that it's like they can't just suppress it. They can't just like. So I think eventually we'll get to that point. And also like, people talk about the Great Reset of like, there's been multiple in the past. There's things called like, I don't know. There's all these crazy ideas. There's something called the mud flood. I don't know if you ever heard of that one.
It's
like
one.
the
What's
idea of it's the idea that like, I'm not saying I believe in this anyways, but like there's all these different theories. Like that's one saying like basically in the 1800s, basically there was some sort of cataclysmic event where like mud flooded the whole entire world, filled it up 40 feet of like, so everything got, because they'll do all this stuff in Europe and all these cities all over the world, and like they'll dig below and it's like the buildings go another like 40, 50 feet into the ground, and it's like, and people are like, wait a second, like, and they're finding these statues, so like almost everything got covered in mud, and then almost there was like a reset of society, and they like, certain people that gave the influence to how that society was going to be structured, created the new systems and structure. And so it's like most of the stuff that we know, like basically after the 1800s is like wiped off, and we've just been fed this certain information. So I don't know if any of that is particularly true, but there's a lot of different, like, I just tell you, it's a little weird, and there's a lot of certain things that point to signs in one way or another that at one point in the past, there were some different things in history is actually said, and there was societies or cultures in one way, form, or another that knew a lot of things.
And we're just learning.
Right, and you can see that even, too, if you look at indigenous cultures, like Indians in America versus indigenous tribes in Africa and indigenous tribes in Central America and South America, like things that weren't even connected to each other physically, but they all like had the same discoveries about the universe and the world that like, these people have never communicated, and technically were these ancient indigenous, like, non-advanced societies, but like they knew all this stuff and they never interacted with each other. And like, where did this information?
And it was like similar beliefs, like
things that we're just now discovering with modern science. It's like, where did this information come from?
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's ridiculous, man. I feel like we're just right now. It's when we're realizing all these things, and I think we're gonna learn a lot more. And thankfully, I'm very thankful. And I look back and I'm like, I'm very thankful that I'm young right now, because I feel like so many more things that we're gonna discover in our lifetime, and hopefully I live a long life. But
Yeah,
you never know. But
I'm hoping this
knock on
podcast
wood.
doesn't get taken down, bro. Like,
Yeah,
you might.
it might. Now that
after
I'm
we
thinking
hit all
about
these
it, yeah.
topics, it's like, all right.
But I like
think
it,
about
bro.
your
This
fucking-
conversation, this is something that enthuses me. I love having conversations like this and talking about these things.
Yeah,
but
me too. We haven't talked any business.
yeah, we haven't talked any business whatsoever. Let's get back into business then. So tell me a little bit about the hotel in Tulum, how you got started with that, and what made you go to Tulum in the first place.
So I moved to Tulum last year in November. Had been working at my sales company, and I still have my tech startup, but like that was the majority of my time. Was doing that for like a decade, and eventually it just got to the point where I was like not feeling as fulfilled and wanted to change things up. I kind of got out of nowhere very passionate about music, and I felt like that was more of where my natural genius lied. Was like in artistry. Like I always like growing up, I wanted to be a film director. I did entrepreneurial stuff, but like that was my passion. Got denied from like every film school I applied to. Reapplied again when I was in college. Got denied again. Didn't even get an interview any of the time. So I was like, all right, screw it. Like I'll just have 3 majors in business, and like I'll figure out. I'm just gonna go make a bunch of money, and then I'll go back and do art once I've made money just for fun.
Yeah. Once I can sustain myself. Once I'm financially free, I'll do whatever.
So it was kind of that to a degree of like, all right, I've done all this stuff before. Like I got really good at like, in my company at the time, I was like broke all the sales records, was one of the top performers, and it's like I got really good at things that I don't actually think I was ever naturally talented or gifted at. I got good because I grinded and worked my ass off and eventually became really good at them. But I was like, I don't really think that's where my gifts are in the world. So I felt like my gifts were more in the lines of artistry and like music and creation. I was like, dude, if I even spent like an ounce of the amount of energy that I spent doing all these things and building all these skills that like aren't naturally, I don't naturally have, and I actually put that into things I'm naturally gifted in without even like trying, it's like, where could that take me? So I got captivated. I visited Tulum one time for like a week, and I was like, I'm moving here. Like I just knew right away. I always wanted. When I traveled to Bali, I really liked Bali, and it was like one other city that I really could see myself being in. But like, dude, it's on the other side of the world. It's a big commitment to go out there. And so when I found Tulum for the first time, I was like, wait a second. This place is like an hour and a half flight from Miami. It's in the same time zone. It like has pretty much everything I liked about Bali, maybe even more. And I'm like, and it's right here. It's like low. I can go have the experience of like living abroad in another country, and it's like still low commitment for me because I was like, I'd never done that before. So I was just really attracted to the area, the vibe, the energy of that city. So I quit my job basically, moved down there, decided I was just going to start making music, and I wanted to take some time to like slow down. And naturally, as everything I've ever done, like I instantly filled up my schedule with other bullshit. And so I started the project. So that's kind of how it started. As I got down there, I have my place here in Miami. But I was like, I probably should buy a place down here and get an investment property so I can have 2 spots and go back and forth between them, and just kind of whenever, like, spend summers in Miami, spend fall and spring in Tulum, kind of build like 2 different homes for myself. And so I saw like 40 different properties, eventually saw like one, which crazy story on this is like, I knew before, like I told my partner that was with me, like before we even got out of the car, hadn't even seen anything. Like I didn't even know where we were. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is the one. Like I knew, like before we even stepped out of the car, I was like, this is the one. Yeah. So we saw like 40 of them. Ended up like they brought us to this one. They're like, oh, we're gonna build this house. It's only this much money. And I was like, oh, that's probably the best ROI you've shown us this whole weekend. And they're like, well, there's this like plan. They're gonna build 4 of them, and it was like these 1-story houses. And like, oh, and if you want, we could build it like 2 stories. And I was like, all right. And I was like, well, you're building like 4 more of these. And I'm like, so can we like customize this if we want? Because it was like a real estate company that was selling us it. And they're like, yeah, sure. And then we talked a little more. We ended up meeting with the developer, and I'm like, yeah, can we just buy all 4 and like own the land and just like have everything? And they're like, sure. And then I was like, can we build an event space on it as well? And then we worked through that, built that. Then we like redid the whole entire plans, basically had the lot, added an event space, raised everything to 2 floors, the rooftop, private pool and everything. So we were going to do that. And I was like, all right, cool. This is going to be a great property. I'll just like Airbnb this out. Had little experience in real estate, to be honest, at the time. But I had a lot of experience doing other things and creating visions into life. Then it went from like 1 to 4 to 4 event space to like Airbnb to like, maybe we'll have like a hotel to like then everyone else started in Tulum, like a lot of the other hotels on the beach started buying all the land near us. And we were like, oh shoot, we better do this. Like, so
we got to do it quick.
We bought the lots next to us and started buying everything. So then, basically it went from like 1 house to 4 to like Airbnb property to like now it's going to be like a world-class hotel. It's going to have 25 villas in the first 2 phases. We're building like another 8-bedroom villa with a private like recording and production studio. And the vision behind it was really to create like, this is what I'm really excited about with this property is that most real estate, what I realized like halfway through the project is that most real estate is built with one thing in mind, which is money. Which is not a bad thing. That's how real estate works. It's like things get built because there's an ROI off of it, and it
there's
makes
an
sense
opportunity to make money.
Because the people that like you said, capitalism, like things don't get built unless there's money behind it. If
unless
it
there's a
make
need
money,
for
like,
it.
it doesn't get built.
Exactly.
And which is fine. I think that's great. That's how we move forward because like people can say, oh, we're going to create an opportunity for these people. Now we have an opportunity for development team. Now there's an opportunity for the management team. Now there's all these people that have an opportunity because we can build and create something. But there's very few projects that are built with like a purpose first, and then like the money and figuring out how to make it work comes on the back end. Like, so like even a lot of the hotels in Tulum are like, they were probably built for money, and then they're like, oh, and we're going to add in these like healing vibes and these conscious pieces.
Yeah, to make it more Tulum vibe.
To make it feel good at the hotel, but it was built from money.
Yeah.
Like we really kind of the purpose of this, like when it started off with the event space is because like I wanted to create land, partially because of all the crazy shit that's going on. Like, if we already need someone, we need to get out of here.
Yeah, you have a place to go.
But I wanted to create something that was essentially, I just have so many different people I've interviewed on podcasts, all these people that are leaders in the world, and they have their tribes and their communities. And I wanted to create an event space where people can have stellar, transformative events, host healing events, host corporate masterminds, be connected and in with nature. And so that was kind of the vision from it. I ran an event for a lot of people in my podcast community in Mexico back in November. It's like a logistical nightmare. It was a great event, but like we had to rent 3 Airbnbs and the event space was somewhere. And it was just like a logistical, like everything in Tulum is boutique. So it's very hard. It's a hot spot for events, but it's very hard to get like 30 people into one location anywhere in Tulum. So we wanted to like essentially build this like compound where people can like rent out the whole thing, have the whole entire land, like basically own a jungle resort themselves and be able to host stellar transformative events there. And so it's also another like from the business side, Tulum's very seasonal. So during like January, December, February, the rates go like there's an undersupply. So there's over demand of like you can't even find a place. And they're like $1,000 a night for someone that doesn't have air conditioning. Now during the summer, people think, oh, the investment opportunity is great down there. A lot of places like they'll crush it in January, but then like during the summer, there's an oversupply and an underdemand in that area.
I could see that because a lot of people going there are like also snowbirds. Like that happens here in Miami as well. One of the guests I had right now, he was telling me that he has an Airbnb here, and he says, you would think that the season that people come here is the summer, but it's not. It's the winter. Like people want to come here in the winter. They come from like places that are like freezing, and they want to come over here somewhere tropical.
The peak season is like November to like February times. So and by the way, it's like the other thing, Tulum is not like mostly American. It's way more like international. It's an international hotspot, kind of like an Ibiza or Mykonos, to where you really have like that. That's why it's also like during those season years, like there's like a month where it's just like straight Canadians, and the next month there's just a bunch of Israelis and all these like Colombian. So it gets a lot of international influence, and there's a ton of Americans there too. But it has like this worldly, like I've never met so many different people. Think I'm like hanging out with like Mexicans and Americans. Tulum is like a completely different vibe than Cancun. Like Cancun's like America in Mexico.
That's what I've heard,
It's like welcome to America, but in Mexico. It's like you're basically hanging out with Americans, but everyone's working is a Mexican. Versus Tulum is like you'll go out to a bar there, and it's just like there's a group of Colombians over here. These people are from Argentina. These people are from like Norway. There's a couple of Germans over there. These people are from like some random place in Asia. There's someone from New York City. This is a group of people from like Houston. Like there's a weird hodgepodge of like people. So, but from the business side was like what we're doing is basically creating as an event space so that like during the summertime where things go low, like that's when we'll do a lot of events and actually
yeah.
raise the revenue, and then we'll capitalize as a hotel during the peak seasons and stuff. So
Smart.
yeah, it's kind of vision, and then we're getting ready to open it now. Like started off, which is an encouragement maybe for anyone listening to the podcast and the show is like, okay, I did get a real estate degree, but I don't feel like I learned anything from that. And I legitimately didn't know really anything about what I was doing when I started this project. Like I said, I started off as like, I'm going to buy like a $200,000 condo and maybe rent it out on Airbnb. That was where I started. And then fast forward later, by the end of the year, we'll have about we have raised $4 million in capital, built like a $10 million hotel in 12 months.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
But
I say it as an encouragement of like, dude, so many people like wait to start things until they figure everything out, and it's just like you will never figure it out. Like each step has just been like one step. All right, now we need this. How the hell do we do this? We need this person.
You learn as you go. You learn on the fly.
And you gotta like just trust yourself and trust that you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool to see like all the right people come together behind this project. The person running the hotel, the marketing team behind it, like all the staff, like. It's just starting. It's gonna be a really epic experience
awesome, man.
for people.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Check it out.
Andrew's inviting me over there for 3 weeks for free over there to Tulum.
I don't know about for free, but we do a little business exchange or something. But no, we'll come down, bro. Come down. You'll get the little class treatment.
I gotta go.
We got you.
I have to. I'm looking forward to it. I saw we're gonna put a picture over here right now on the podcast. You guys will see it, but how it's gonna look. I saw pictures of it. It looks like it's gonna be beautiful,
dude, and
absolutely gorgeous.
The renderings don't do it justice.
I
So
100% believe that.
And another tip that I'll give, I mean, with any of my businesses, one of the big things that I've learned is, like I mentioned all the failed business that I've had. First off, like anytime I've done something by myself, it's pretty much always failed. Very rarely. It's just so time intensive. Everyone wants to keep their own equity, but it's like the amount of energy that's required. It's like eventually you're going to give it away once you get to the next stage anyways. So it's always comes down to like who you can work with and who you can pull into the vision behind it on the team. Like we just have a really good team. The developer, I'm so used to in life, like having a vision for something, and then it's like if you want someone to like, you hire someone on like Fiverr or something like that to create something, and it's like you have a vision, try to describe it, and I'm like used to expecting like, it's gonna be like 80% of what I was like thinking about, and it's like almost there but not quite there. My experience with this guy has been like the exact opposite. Like here's the renderings, and I'm like expecting it. I'm like, all right, mentally preparing myself. It's probably not gonna be as good as like what it looks like on paper, and then I'm like, holy shit, it's like 10 times better. Wow. And I'm like, so I have a vision in my head, and like somehow like every time I get there, I'm like, dude, this is
insane.
This is better than I like was. I had a big vision for it. And I'm like, this is even better than what I was expecting. So it's been really cool too. Of like the renderings, like it doesn't look very like it's just the jungle. We keep flying out film crews out there, and it's just like so hard to document the property because there's so much like jungle around it and the way it's built that it's like very hard to get it in shots. But it makes it a really cool vibe.
That's awesome, man. So when's the grand opening again? It's in October?
Grand opening is in December 2nd. Okay. And then, October, November is going to be our soft openings. Okay. We're doing an artist exhibition week, a music exhibition week, flying out all the influencers, models, bloggers, whole 9 yards of different people and creators to come out there and create stuff just basically for 2 months. We have a couple events that are booked out for then. And then December 2nd, we'll have like a full weekend. We're going to bring in some like headline DJs, have a bunch of healing events free for the community, and then kind of kick off the grand open the hotel. So, which has been a tight deadline to meet. But the thing is, December and January is the peak season. So we're like, we got to get this thing open before then. So,
and great news. You told me before the podcast, you're also, you're going to have a kid soon, right?
That's right. So I found that. So I was living in Tulum. Now I'm back in Miami for a little bit because, don't really want to have the kid over there. But they do have one of the best. There's something called the Green School. It's being built in Tulum. It's one of the best schools in the country, in the world. So we'll probably end up making our way back down there at one point. But my girl's due in January, so
congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm super excited.
That's awesome.
It's been so on top of tech company, the startup, the hotel being built, like moving to there. I have like I didn't share that either, but like I'm leaving in like 3 weeks to go to, like I'm playing in Albania a bunch of shows.
Wow, that's awesome.
Some shows in Mykonos and Tel Aviv and Israel. So I have like a Europe tour for music.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So all this stuff, and then just
yeah.
balancing the baby on the way at the same time. So
a lot of stuff going for you right now. That's
but
awesome.
it's cool. The name of the hotel is Tulum.
Okay.
Which is the Mayan. It's Mayan for Kaaba means beginnings or origin, and Lum, which is kind of like a play on Tulum, but Luum means earth, so it means like Earth's beginnings or Earth's origins, which is special to me too. It's like the baby's coming on. It's like new beginnings for like a lot of things. It's doing, we're doing January, so that's gonna be like a fun balance of getting the hotel cranking and then also getting
that's beautiful.
having
that's
to be
awesome.
here for a little bit. So it should be fun though.
That's awesome. What obviously you're a successful businessman, but for somebody starting off, what tips would you give them? What would you tell them? Like if you could go back to Andrew when he was 16, what advice would you give him?
Yeah, I would say, I think we talked about a little bit about like like having an open mindset, being curious, and the first thing is like invest in yourself. I think like before you even invest into a lot of like the best business, the best piece, the thing that you can invest in is going to be yourself. Like I spent, before I even ever had $100,000 in my bank account, I'd spent like 200, 300 grand on like personal growth, personal development, being part of different masterminds, communities, surrounding myself with other people, which, at the time I would have saved that money, invest into a business. I probably have more money, but like I was investing into me and developing Andrew Evans' social capital, like of like who I am and my skill set.
I don't even think you would have more money, to be honest. I'm gonna give you that right now.
What'd you say?
I don't even think you would have more money if you would have used that money to invest in business, because you wouldn't have developed the skills.
Exactly.
I wait, like for example, I was about to say I wasted, but not. I invested like $15,000 into a mastermind like a couple months ago, and it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made. It's like that money, you get so much more from networking, meeting people. Like you get 10 times more business just putting that money in than just investing it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's probably the second piece of advice is play the long-term game.
Yeah.
I got a lot of friends and like, chats with guys in crypto that have a lot more money than me. Just they're like, I just friends that are like 20, 21 years old and like multi millionaires, have tons of money. And I see all these people, but it's like, I don't want to sell this to them, but it's just like, that's just not going to last.
No, it's
like,
not.
it's not like you can get lucky, but you don't get lucky over and over and over and over again. Right. And so it's like, there's certain people that are playing the long-term game. It's just like investing and stuff like that too, of like things come and go all the time.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not like them particularly about it. There's a lot of people here that you can tell based off their actions that they're playing the short-term game.
Yeah.
Meaning
100%.
like if you're playing the long-term game, you care about things like reputation and how you're perceived by people. Like we haven't even chatted in like 4 or 5 years or whatnot. But like just as an example, there's a lot of times like I see people that run a team and then they like employee leaves and they're like, basically tell them to fuck off like on their way out, or, they like, kind of like don't give this customer like they like hurt like kind of shady, business practices, or like people that are like legitimate scammers. It's like anyone that actually believes in themselves would never do that because they value the reputation a lot higher. Of like, if you're playing the game of like, hey, what am I going to be building? Like, cool, like 20 grand here, 100 grand here, 500 grand, $1 million here. If you're like thinking about being in like the big boy league when you're like 30, 40, 50 of like really having a lot of money, really having a lot of influence or power in the world, like you ain't letting like, you don't give a shit about 20 grand here to try to make a quick buck or like to like, get what you can out of it. Like reputation and like who you are is like way more important.
It's way more important. It's way more valuable to anybody else in that level. Like they value reputation a lot more. And the thing about reputation too is it takes years to build and it could take a second to destroy. And that's one of the most important things they got to understand. And you destroy that, big people are not going to want to do business with you. They're not going to want to be involved with you. And it just says a lot about your character.
Yep. It's like the video games. You remember, I don't know if you ever played like those video games growing up where it's like, I don't know, like the war games where it's like you can do certain things and you can go out and like start attacking the other villages or try to go things, or you can like, I don't know, like on RuneScape, you can keep mining, and like building up like the skill level until eventually like you forward it, like everyone else is out there trying to like make moves and grab quick stuff, and like if you just like are whatever, like you're in a fort and you keep building and fortifying that fort up to where like everyone else was like, when you look at like who's ahead and who the leader charts are, and this person's like at the bottom, at the bottom, at the bottom, at the bottom. But then like once they're ready, like if they've done all the fortifying, invested all that money into like the race car. It's like now you go and you just
Yeah.
like lap
Yeah.
everybody over and over again, and no one stands a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like playing the long-term game of like, yeah, if you want to go make something quick, but like investing into yourself, playing the long-term game, you know, really, really getting curious about things and trying to like learn as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I always tell people like there's 3 things that you essentially need to take advantage of opportunities when they come, because opportunities are literally everywhere. Like I always have people hit me up and they're like, hey, Andrew, I have this business idea, which especially when they want me to like sign an NDA or they don't want to tell it to me because they think I'm going to steal it. I'm like, bro, like
Just say it. Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't like, first off, I believe this at least. Anytime you have a business, anytime you have any idea ever, if you have that idea,
Somebody
I
else has had
promise
it.
you there's at least another 100,000 people in the world and the 8 billion people that live on this
Yeah,
planet that
yeah.
have also had the same idea because
Exactly.
ideas are worthless. Execution is what
Execution,
matters.
100%.
You know, who can actually
Yeah, yeah,
execute
yeah.
it. So it's like you might have the idea, so does Joey, so does Schmo, but like who's actually going to do it and make it
Exactly.
happen is
Yeah,
a completely different story. So, you know, anyways, when people where was I even going? This
Yeah, when people sign
there's
up, yeah.
opportunities everywhere.
Yeah.
So like, you know, one opportunity is not going to disappear, and there's constant new ones always. I have 20, 30 business ideas every
Yeah,
single
me
day,
too.
which is why like I honestly like sometimes regret how much I have on a schedule because I keep.
Yeah.
I'm
you
like, oh,
can't,
I should
yeah.
start that business, and I'm like, no, Andrew, you don't need to do that. Like,
Yeah,
it's
focus
okay.
on
like,
what you're doing. Literally, I have the same problem every single day.
Right. So, but when you see opportunity, it's like you need 3 things. You need financial capital, social capital, and skill set.
Yeah.
It's basically it. It's financial capital, social capital, and skill set. That's what you need to take advantage of opportunities. The problem is like you're really a winner when you have all 3. The problem is that and like a lot of people only have like one or the other. Like a lot of people, if you come from money and you have a lot of money and you have the financial capital piece because daddy will fund it, but like if you haven't built up your own skills and like actually worked hard and learned and invest in yourself, and if you don't have like the right people or the right team to make things happen, like money only goes so far, right? If you have high level skills, right? Like you grew up in like a working class family and you've been grinding, working your ass off. Now your skills are like you really need the other. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And like if you don't have like you don't need a ton of financial capital. It doesn't have to be your money. It can be other people's money. But you better find some rich friends of like
you gotta
who
get
can invest in
investors,
you, who can move things forward. Of like, if you want to build a deal, a lot of times like you got to be able to get capital. And then the last thing is like, hey, it's like social capital, which is like, dude, everyone that you've ever met in your life is part of your social capital.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of whether they're in business with you, like you just never know when you're going to need someone. When like someone else that you knew 5-10 years ago is gonna have like the key to what you need or what you're missing of like, oh, that person has exactly what I need in that moment. And it's like you don't treat people out of like what they can give you in the future. Like you just don't know. So you just treat people well and build relationships because it's the most valuable thing you have is like all the relationships that you have. You know? So it's like building those 3 things I think is what's important.
Yeah. I actually going back to what you just said, I saw a video, I forgot who, but it was this famous guy and he literally became a billionaire just by he was a partner with some tech investor that like some tech founder from a startup that just he turned it into like a multi-billion-dollar company. And one of the things he said, he was like, when I was in college, like I was just very nice to all these kids that were 10 times smarter than me that they might have been bullied by other people or seen like as nerds from other people, and I was just nice to them. And then like one of them wanted to partner up with me because I was one of his friends, and it just ended up happening like that, and that's how I'm a billionaire. Like, because that's how I'm a multi-millionaire. Like
that's great.
It's crazy.
And it's like you don't do things like, and people can feel energy, you know. So if you're doing something to like, what can I get out of this person? Or like people can feel that, which is why it's like, dude, the real willingness is like you treat people before they ever have anything they could give you. You know, when they're like just the nerd in school that no one gives a shit about. It's like he's got nothing to offer me right now, but I'm going to treat this person well. I'm going to treat them with respect. I'm going to build a relationship. And it's like, you know, offering and being like the go-to man of like whenever someone needs something, like you have their back. You always have something you're able to help them. Like when you do that, you build up more network equity. And like people text me of like just introductions and they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Andrew's like, you know, an expert in the NFT space. I'm like, I'm definitely not an expert. I don't know anything about that. And I'm like, but sure, I'll help you on your project. Like people just will make intros of like, I don't even know. Or just, they just think I've built up the social capital where things just flow my way, you know, because people send them to it. But it's based off of like the legacy and how you treat people and the relationships. And like, people grow, change, and evolve too. So it's just make sure you're like, you don't burn bridges, and you
Yeah.
like treat people with respect and love, and like anytime that you have something where you can help people, and if you can, like try to do it.
Yeah. Why do you think many people don't play the long-term game and instead decide to play the short-term game? Because like for example, Warren Buffett, like they ask him, and he's definitely like a long-term investor, and that's something he preaches a lot. And somebody asked him in an interview, they're like, "Why do people not just copy your exact strategy and become billionaires like you? Like it's not that hard what you do." And he goes, "Yeah, the thing is, people don't want to get rich slowly."
Yeah, that's really it.
Yeah.
You don't want to get rich slowly, and it's not.
Yes.
You take it out of the financial side of like
Yeah,
playing the
man.
long term
Yeah, yeah.
game. It's like people. As I get older, you realize like how much you didn't know when you were younger, you know,
Yeah.
and you like grow up a little bit to a degree. And so like I think I, know a lot now, and I'm going to, be 30 in a little bit, and I'm going to realize I was an idiot. I'm going to hit 40 and realize all these things that I didn't know. So I think a lot of people are just like trying to race to get it to a destination versus like thinking about like enjoying like themselves on the actual journey. And so I think people like have trouble mentally processing that. Like it's kind of like when you're in high school and like you're a freshman and you think you're gonna be like so old, like you're gonna feel so old once you're a senior.
Yeah.
And then you're like feeling that like on top of the world, and you're senior, and then you get to college and you're like, God, I'm a scrub.
I'm
I'm like a
a
little
dweeb.
kid. Like, yeah, exactly. And then you like,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you're a senior in college, you're like on top of the world,
Yeah,
and then
you
you
get
get
to
out
the
there to
business
like
world.
the real world, then you realize like, yeah, bro,
Yeah.
like you're a scrub.
Yeah.
And so like people, I think oftentimes like you really as a kid, it's like when you're 14, you have trouble processing what life will be like when you're 16.
Yeah.
When you're 20, it's hard for people. Most people can't even like think this week. They can't even set goals and habits for like what they're going to accomplish this week or this month. So it's really hard for them to make decisions today that are in the frame of next year or the year after or 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So what I talk about, one concept is the idea of like in the game of business or life, there's different levels to it, right? So you have like you have the sheep who can't think for themselves, who literally just do what they're told, and they're put into a box, and like they just, like what we were talking about earlier, they can't think for themselves. They can't.
They need somebody to tell them how to
and they have to be employees. They have to be told what to do. Then there's like the solopreneurs who like they're like entrepreneurs. They're solopreneurs of like they can think for themselves. They can do things and make actions, but they're not like consistent enough or can't think further enough of like if they had a team, they can't manage a team, right? They can only manage themselves, which they don't need someone else to tell them what to do, but they can't manage anybody else because for instance, if I'm running a team, if I run a restaurant, you got to give them their schedule 2 weeks ahead of time. If you are struggling to balance your own schedule on a week-to-week basis, like you can't manage other people's schedules, right? Then you have someone that can manage a team of people, like a sales manager, sales leader, or like a leader, of a team, and then you can have some people that can manage like, I would say like a CEO level, which is like
a bunch of different teams.
Yeah, so if someone manages a team, they're thinking 6 months ahead of time, like months out. They'll be able to think about like the way they orient themselves. Like their employees can't think that way. So people get paid based on how far ahead of time they can think and plan and make decisions. Once you get to a CEO level, like they're thinking minimum 1 year out from the calendar. Like all their decisions is not like what's happening day to day. It's like what's happening next year and the year after that. They're thinking in 5 to 10 year plans. Big corporate CEOs, Fortune 200 companies, they have 50, 100-year plans. That's the frame that they're thinking from. And then you have people that are what I would call kings or queens in the world. But like a king, someone that has a dynasty, like they're not thinking about like legacy. Them. Yeah, they're thinking about like multi-generationals. They're thinking about the kingdom that's being built. They're thinking about not 100 years. They're thinking about the next 300 to 500 years. And like how is what decisions I'm making today going into impact the next 300 to 500 years of my family or community or country or legacy of like
world,
like if someone that's thinking at like that level. And so like people get put into positions based off of like how far out they can think and see themselves. And the reality is most people are sheeps, and then like some people are like the solopreneurs, and then there's levels that are people that like but like I think it's very hard for people to process things that are as it was when I was I'm still learning. I'm not saying I'm a king. I'm learning to like eventually hopefully be there one day. But like it's even hard for me to process what my life will be like when I'm 40. So like trying to make decisions today of like, oh, you'll have all this success when you're 40. It's like that seems way too far away. What's gonna make me successful now? So it's just a change in state of like perspective, and perspective is power. When you have it.
That's golden. That's a lot of knowledge right there. Well, I think it's time. We're ready to end the podcast, but I wanted to if anybody wants to reach you, maybe an investor that wants to invest in your project, are you still open to investors or no? Or
if you asked me that like a couple weeks ago, no, but we just started a new phase of construction.
okay, so there we go. If there's
capital
any
pools
investors
back
that
up.
are interested, or anybody that wants to reach out to you, ask you a question regarding business or anything in general, where could they reach you?
Cool.
As
Yeah.
well, and then
email, I'll give that to you. Which you can shoot me at. Also, like
Instagram,
I use
I'll put your
Instagram.
Instagram right here as
Yeah,
well.
I use at Andrew Evans Official. I use that Instagram all the time, so I do a lot of business on Instagram. So feel free to hit me up there, or they can send me over an email, and we can go from there. You can also connect with me on my website.
Yeah.
It's www.andrewevans.io.
Okay.
And there's some more stuff on there as well, but. Yeah, brother, it's been a blessing.
It was amazing, man. I liked it a lot. Great
yeah, we've talked
conversation.
about.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed it. We could keep going for
I enjoyed it.
hours.
Yeah. We could.
But we'll be Joe Rogan and have like a 5-hour podcast.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.